Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 30th, 2026 Public Works Committee. I would like to officially call this meeting to order at 7:05. And would everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Margaret, would you call the roll, please?
Kelly Malazzi.
Here.
Tom Broderick.
Here.
Jason March. Here. Matt Dunn.
Here.
Ann Sather.
Here.
Brian Walsh.
Here.
Christina Alaris.
Here.
And Mike.
Here.
Thank you. So we're here for one reason and one reason only, and that is to weigh in and talk about the direction and get feedback on the survey that we're going to be deploying very shortly regarding how we move forward with the community center. For the purposes of everyone in this room and everybody watching, we know that the current building of the senior center is over 100 years old, and we do have an obligation to our community, to the taxpayers, the seniors, and all of the residents of Trumbull to figure out what to do next. So it's absolutely a priority that we navigate. Considering the failing building, we want to be financially responsible. And tonight's feedback is going to be taken into consideration before the fielding of the survey begins. So that being said, I will open the floor up to questions. Anybody, and we can just talk to one another. We can ask questions. We'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on the content of the survey. And Ms. Councilman Sather.
And it's fine too. But so who made the questions?
That, I don't know if you want me to weigh in on that, or, it was a collaborative effort between Vicky's office and other stakeholders, and obviously Sienna themselves.
Okay, so a couple things. Was there any consideration of, like some of the wording is interesting in terms of like, don't know versus refuse? Like, I feel like those choices need to be like, I don't actually know, or I'm not going to answer that question. Does that sort of make sense? So maybe those, like maybe it be a third. Does that make sense? Another option?
I will let you respond in a second. What I will say is, unfortunately, no one from Sienna is here tonight to answer those questions.
Okay.
That being said, we will make a note of all of those concerns that you all are bringing up tonight, and we can address those with the team from Sienna before they actually begin fielding.
I mean, I think some of these questions are pretty loaded in the sense of they're a bit of a they have a bias to them, the idea of, like, for instance, on question 12, right? I feel like that's not a particularly, for each statement, please tell me whether you would make more, excuse me, I can read. Please tell me whether it would make you more likely to support, less likely to support, or would not affect your opinion about building a new senior center. The estimated tax impact resulting from the bonding could be $30 per $100,000 assessed home value. That means the average home tax increase would be less than $150 as of November 2025. Are we asking them something from the past? Like, they can't. Does that make sense?
I do believe,
I'm
and
confused
I
with the
will
wording.
invite anybody else that wants to chime in on this.
Sorry.
But no, you're totally makes sense. I think that some of the language came directly from some of the language from the referendum language.
Okay. How can you?
I think what
go
we're
back in
really
time?
trying to understand is, are people aware of facts, right? Like, how are people making decisions, and do they understand things like how much this will cost? But it's a well taken point.
I mean, I think if I was, and I know you get it on the phone, so you're listening to it, and that's really long and wordy. And I feel bad because I'd be like, could you say that again? And then they would, you know what I mean? because I was reading it and I had to read it again. So I'm just worried about some of the how things are phrased.
I think Ms. Gaudiano has some.
I just was going to offer some,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's perspective, but process maybe.
Okay.
Right. So Siena Institute drafted the first round of the survey. And what they did was they took the referendum question, the FAQ document that was put on the town website. They were given the minutes of prior building committee meetings. They watched the video of the forum, I believe that was held, right? There was the building committee where, I don't remember where that was held.
Madison.
At Madison, right? So they took the video of that. They talked with myself and the chair of public works, and they took a first stab at these questions. So some things like that, we went back and forth, for example, on that exact 12A. The initial framing of that question or that sub answer was verbatim from the bond referendum, right? So it said the estimated tax impact could be $30 per 100,000 of assessed home value. That means for a home with a market value of $500,000, this would be a tax increase of $105. And that question is just clunky. What we're trying to do is figure out how do you convey the price associated with the $27 million in a question, right? But tonight is designed to get feedback. So I agree. I mean, we noted, my exact comment to Siena was, I still don't like this answer, right? Because I think it's really hard in a phone conversation to convey the cost. But that was the process. And then we looked at a few things. We looked at the first few questions of why or how did you feel about the referendum in November, right? So we did look back there to understand both how people voted, because the idea of this is you want to be able to crosswalk data. You want to be able to take the answers from one question and crosswalk it with the answers from another question and be able to say somebody who voted yes said they felt strongly about this and this, right? You want to be able to do that. So we looked back at how and why people voted the way they did for the referendum question. Then we decided to look forward to say, okay, forget how you voted in the past. Let's talk about what the amenities you would want are, what your beliefs and perceptions around the current senior center are. Then in the future, right, how, if you were to vote on something again, how would you vote, right? Because I think ultimately for all of us, the question is, we have a senior center. It's costing us money to maintain. What, if anything, do we do with it? And so we're trying to gauge feedback. So that was how we went about from a process standpoint, looking back at the referendum that happened in November, and then attempting to look forward to what are the amenities and beliefs around a future senior center. So with that in mind, that may help Kelly guide some of the conversation, but I just wanted to give that context.
It's also a really good point, though, because the number is referred to in question 7 about the dollars, but then it isn't, I don't think it's mentioned again. So you're right, a person who's like just going about their lives, I don't think is making that connection to, because we obviously all know, but right? So that's actually a really good point. I think we'll have to perhaps talk to Siena about whether there's anything we can do to either tie that together. Because, I mean, I think just candidly, and I think we can all agree, we really just want to know what people want. Like, do they literally want us to do nothing? Do they want us to spend no money, right? Like, we all are just, and obviously a lot of us are very, very passionate about this for a number of reasons, but we really, and this was also a bipartisan concept in the first place. It was mentioned at one of our town council meetings that this was something that we should do. So we all, I think, agree. What else? Mr. Walsh?
I just, like, I think going through it,
Mike.
it's on.
Oh.
He's just soft spoken.
I'm soft-spoken, sorry. Like, I feel like going through the survey, it's directing everybody to, like, a specific outcome. I feel like it needs to be a little broader. And, like, what are people looking for are they willing to spend money on the project? Where do they want the project? And what are they, trying to get the project into? Some of the questions become very into the weeds about very specific items.
Can you give me an example?
So, like the question we were just talking about, it's getting very deep into like prices and tax base that we don't even have the final number on it at this point anyway. So, we're putting numbers out there that might not be true. So you're asking somebody's opinion on something that we don't quite know is exactly accurate. And then, so then we put like the locations, it's the 3 locations that they're already at, and then they add 1 extra. That should be like an open-ended kind of question where you could put in where do you think in town it might be. So maybe we get an idea of what the citizens are actually looking for. Could be helpful, might not be, because they might come up with ideas that aren't.
And it does
viable at
say
all,
town owned, and
know.
that get, how many people say it should be at the mall, right?
Yeah.
So like, we don't own the mall. Like this is a conversation that we've had on the building committee for almost 2 years now, right? I think part of this is a mechanism to try to inform people more, because clearly there were a lot of people made decisions about something in the moment, right? Councilman Marsh?
I mean, one second. I'm just not sure that a survey is the way that you want to inform people about something. A survey is to find out what people think about something, not let them garner information about what they're thinking about.
I think you have to kind of do both. You raise a good point about sort of the way the questions are structured, but it's kind of in my opinion, it's a little bit delicate situation, because you don't want to ask too much of an open-ended question, because then you're going to get 36,000 different opinions, and the whole goal here is to get useful data. And so you need people to answer certain questions, and you have to give them a finite number of choices on those questions in order to have meaningful data result from that. So I'm not saying I have the answers to that, but there's a middle ground that we have to strike, and that's the purpose why we're here.
I think we were just a little bit maybe heavy into one side. We got to try to bring this back to the middle a little bit more. I also had a question too on, do we know from Sienna, do we get all the crosstabs, like with the data after they're done, we get all the information so we know exactly how everything was laid out?
I believe I recall in the meeting where she was present, she said the only way they will release the data to us is if we guarantee them that we are completely 100% transparent about what the results are.
Okay.
Yeah, they're part of some national, and I won't be able to recall the name. They're part of some national group that requires transparent release of data. Otherwise, they will not contract with you. Okay. So they will make it available, and they will work with us to figure out the place to make it available. They will provide it to us and then do a summary presentation of the data, but we will have all of the backup as well.
All right.
So that we can sit and look at it in different ways, or we can look at it and then ask them to present it. Right, we may want question 1 and question 7 crosswalked, and they can do that.
Perfect. And just one other thing I had, sorry. To get it all out of the way in the beginning here. Do we have anything where they're going to, maybe a question that asks what voting district they're in? Just so we know that, if it's all people coming out of one district, then it's going to be biased because, District 6 is probably not going to be in favor of it. We'd like to know that we have a sampling from across the town and all the voting districts.
Question.
And I don't know if people all know their voting districts, so I wonder if there's a way.
Or just
for-
ask where they vote. Which school do you vote at?
Which school?
They don't know.
Even that.
You can
I
say
do
don't
wonder
know.
whether Sienna will be able to give us. I don't know what information they get in doing the call, whether they just get a name and a phone number, or whether we can back into that. But
At least that way we have some idea of where,
It's
the
a
votes
really
are
good
coming
question.
from.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Councilman Alaris?
Just to go back to what Councilman Walsh was talking about in terms of question 9, which are the 4 locations that are town-owned locations, right? There is obviously that don't know. If for whatever reason don't know was the top answer, right, or nobody picked that got more answers than the other 4, then that's also directional information for us to recognize and work towards.
We should probably separate don't know and refuse out of that too, because did we say that, or I'm sorry?
I feel, well, we can
That was
definitely.
a comment before, yeah.
Yes. Did you want to chime in? Okay. Councilman Buswell.
Hey, Kelly.
Hi.
Is the goal when we have these meetings to have Sienna here or to not have them here?
They
Because I
were
think it would be
n-
helpful if they were here for these types of meetings.
Yes, I believe they were unavailable.
The intention was not necessarily to have them for this. It was to get feedback from everybody on the survey and take it to them. They will be the ones presenting the findings of this. And so I'm sitting here with my computer out so I can type all of these comments up and then provide them to them. Some of these things like don't know or refuse, right? They should be able to break that apart unless there is a survey reason for that. Others will take and ask them how we should word these things.
Okay, the other comment I have is, are we asking the question as if this is a senior center or a senior community center or both? And the reason is because it's going to determine the audience that's answering that question. So if it's a senior center, it's a more targeted audience, right? If it's a community center, it's for everybody of all ages. So I think we want to understand clearly what that is, because then we're going to get the best possible answer back.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I'd love to know what everyone's thoughts are, just because we're here, right? This is a discussion item. We're not voting on anything tonight. Does anyone here have strong feelings about whether we call it a community center or whether we call it a senior center or both? Because I believe the referendum language in November was senior / right? Senior / community center.
Well, Kelly, I can answer that question if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I think part of that answer is finding a location first, right? Because maybe we're going to see a location that's closer to town hall that we don't think can fit all of our needs. Let's say I'm very pro community center, right? I want a mega facility. I want it for all ages, right? Maybe I don't think a location around the corner here is ideal for that. So like in some of these questions, we're talking about $150, only $150 a family. But then the next question asks, what location do you want it at? Tashua, Priscilla, Hardy. Well, Tashua might have a price tag of $38 million. Hardy might be $28 million. If we don't know the price tag for those different locations, like I'm glad that I saw Tashua back on here. I've been on the committee, and that location's was thrown out the window a long time ago.
Right.
So we're telling them dollar amounts, but we don't even have a site location picked out and know what the price for that location would be.
Councilman Broderick?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. There is that question 14, which does kind of get to, because going back to that point, we want to know what the citizens and residents of Trumbull think. So they do get to weigh in on that, and that's where you can crosswalk that data with, right, the location. So I do think we could get good information on that from what people think, because I hear exactly what you're saying. And then I go back and forth because I think Councilor Walsh and Buswell, you raised that specific number issue. I feel like if you don't put in the number, maybe that's not being transparent enough, because then you're just floating with no specifics. But I hear what you're saying. I don't know if you have an idea of how you would do that properly.
How about we do a cost ranking? So I have a question, would you be comfortable with such and such a price, and give different price points of the millions that it could possibly be? Start out at the 27 million and work your way up to, wherever you want to go with it. You can go shoot for the stars at 100 million, see where, but give them a ranking to see, and then, you can see what the citizens' appetite for spending is.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think the biggest question that we all want to know is, why did people vote no?
Exactly.
Right? So it's like 6,500 no, 60, like whatever the numbers exactly were, but why did they say no? Was it price? Was it location? Was it for the price without a pool? I mean, we all campaigned. We all heard multiple replies, right? I think that knowing that answer alone is going to help us with half these questions.
Yeah, which is why we're asking it. That's I think I
But
can
that
only
might
speak
e-
for
that might even
myself.
be a
I'm dying to
question,
know.
though.
I'm dying to see the results of this, right? Because as much as we talked to people at doors, obviously we didn't talk to everyone, and it was such a narrow margin, right? It was so very close. So that's a really, really good point.
It's a good point, but again, like Brian's point, you have to take the second step. Is we want to know why you voted no, but we also want to know what would have made you vote yes.
Yes.
So it's a two-part inquiry.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I just want to go to two things. One is back to that question of what do we call it, right? I mean, we've gone round and round and round with Sienna on this. It was called a senior/community center for the referendum. I don't know that that was clarifying for people to understand what that was. For the sake of this and for conversation tonight, we put senior center in here. Do we want to leave senior center in there? Do we want to, I think I tossed out, like, do we just put new facility, right? Like, what is it that we want to call so that we get a clear answer without confusing people, right? We don't want people to answer all of these questions thinking it's a senior center and then answer question 14 and say, well, actually what I want is a community center. So I want to go back to that. We can do that now. And then I want to make a comment about the Toshua location specifically and why that's on here tonight. So I don't know how you want to do that.
Well, it seems like it might be useful for everyone to chime in with their thoughts on whether we call it a community center, whether we call it, right? I mean, I know we're not voting, so this is really anecdotal at this point. If I may be so bold, I think I would put myself out there and say my sense would be a community center. But I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are. I'd love to hear. Mr. Walsh?
I think you go big with the community or the senior community center. Add the community center into it because that's going to give you a cost basis that a community center is going to be much larger than just a senior center. So we're starting out with what the max of it's going to be. If it needs to get shrunk down at some point to a senior center, you can bring it down to a senior center only. That's just my point of view.
I mean, I think there's a lot of latitude there, right? Because the intention and part of the discussion about whatever the new building that we wanted to build was that we all know that the seniors use the building from 9 to 3, and that leaves a brand new building available for things like book clubs, scout meetings, evening art classes, right? Things like that for others. And I don't know how many of you have teenagers, sporty ones. I don't know about sporty ones. There's not a lot for kids to do in this town if they're not sporty, right? So the idea that there would be opportunities for congregation of young people too. So, Mr. Buswell.
So when you talk about a community center, right, we're talking larger facility, right? So I own a facility over 25,000 square feet. We went into that with a business plan, right? So when we saw the vet center, when we had to vote on that, we were demanding a business model, demanding a plan, because we didn't want to have to be responsible for it, right? We wanted an enterprise account. I love where you're going with this, but I sat on that committee, and I still sit on the committee, and for multiple years, I asked for a business model. And I was looked at like I had 5 eyes. And that was for a $32 million building. But we want to go put in a $5 million building over here, and we're like, we're not going to move forward without a business model. So, I mean, I think knowing a business model, knowing the facility might grow, the expenses might grow, which is fine, but are we going to bring profit in? Right? Is it only going to be a luxury for the citizen? Or is it going to be like an NYA in a Newtown type setup? Is there going to be a membership based? Right? Like, these are all more questions. So when you ask, would I rather have a senior center or a community center? Well, I'd love to have a senior center, or I'd love to have a community center, but there's a way to have it where you can offset a lot of the cost. So that helps clarify my feelings on it.
Mm-hmm. I don't think the question is, what do each of us want? I think the question is, what do we want to call it on the survey to provide the least amount of confusion to residents, right? Because I agree, if we get to a place where we want a community center, we should have a business plan. I hear you too, Kelly, why you think community center. I hear seniors who are going to say they want it to be a senior center. We're trying to get information about what people want. It's why that question 14 is on there. We need to decide what to name it in each of these questions so that people are answering a question about a specific building, and whether that is a senior/community center, and then we take the answers and split them apart. I don't know, but that's ultimately what it is. It's not what we want what we want. It's what we want to put on the survey.
That's a very good point. Yeah, go ahead.
So may I just ask a question about this? Questions 13 and 14 are labeled as other possible section 3 questions. So is our thought is it because there's advice from Sienna that there's a certain number of questions we need to stick to? So are we trying to edit down, or are we going to possibly say we want to include both 13 and 14? Because I think those are really worded in a very good way, and 14 gets to the crux of it. Which would you prefer? A state-of-the-art modern senior center, or a multi-purpose community center, or neither, or I don't know, right? That's like the most.
That was whether they are literally in a section 3 or section 4, right, of
Okay.
this, or whether they should be moved to the top.
I
So
see.
you'll see that
Okay.
they're labeled section 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those are in there to figure out where is the best place. For example, 14,
Gotcha.
do we move to the top, which I would argue might make the most sense, so that you are then answering the rest of the questions through the filter of however you are distinguishing or
Right.
selecting
Okay.
that.
That was kind of where I was getting to, is I actually think that 14 is probably the fundamental question, right? Which do you want? Do you want a senior center that primarily benefits older residents? Do you want a multi-purpose community center? Or do you want nothing? Like, I feel like that's a pretty fundamental question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and in regards to 14, I don't disagree. I think it should be towards the front. However, I'm struggling with some of the wording. I feel like it's really weighted in the sense of, so how about, like, I don't understand why we need to use the word state of the art. We could just say a new senior center, and a multi-purpose community center. I feel like those are, like, the term state of the art is kind of like, it's leading, unless you're going to say state of the art community, which either way. So I would just, the editor in me, there's a lot of editing. Like,
And you said remove state of the art, and then what was your other piece of feedback? I apologize.
I'm sorry, that's okay. So I would remove the state of, I would move those to I think that question is,
yeah, the crux of
so
much.
Should be like
And
number
I would,
6.
Once again, I would also, same thing, separate the don't know, like that idea, but this, and then multi-purpose, maybe just call them both, like new senior center or new community center, that would be used by all members of the community. That would be, and then there are like editing things that I just, the teacher in me, I'm like, oh my God, like, they're the very,
Let
number
us have
3,
it.
like number 3, like,
There's surveyor language.
Yeah.
But how about in 2025 November election instead of last year in November 2025? Like, in the
like
November
redundancy.
2025, you know what I mean? Just, or like just simplifying the wording. So like number, like I know we're all like really invested, but like for number 11, like letter C, when you write, we cannot as a town afford, how about the town can't afford? Because I don't know if like the person is going to be like vested as a we, as opposed to the town can't afford this idea or something like that. These are like little things, and then just like the other aspect of when you talk about like rotate and randomize, are we like, that means that they're rotating? So like for instance, like number 9, we just like one caller would get Priscilla Place's letter A, and then the next caller would get Priscilla Place's
Yeah.
letter B.
To randomize that so that the order in which you're receiving them doesn't lead you down a
Okay.
specific direction, right? So there's a lot that are rotate. There's some that are open-ended as well. In the process, we put, A, B, C, D, whatever, but they are open-ended and designed for the person to have the ability to answer without being fed any answer, right? Without being provided any answers. So like number 4 is open-ended, right? They'll be asked,
Yes.
what is the single most important reason for your support? They won't be read A through G.
Okay. Yeah. That would make sense. And then let's see. Yeah, I mean, I guess, and we'd have to like clarify. I struggle with the language too, in the sense of how would you frame it? Could we just say a new facility for something like letter 8, where letter 8? Sorry, excuse me, number 8. Number 8, letter C. Where, like when you use, if we use the term build a new facility, as opposed to senior, I don't know.
Yeah, that's good.
That like, I don't know, as opposed to, because if everyone is like, if somebody answers and says I really prefer a community center, and then they're, I don't know, sorry, there's like the
I think that
senior
makes
center.
sense.
I think number 8 is the one question that is specifically
Specifically
about the old senior center.
Sorry, me not reading the full question when I'm getting
Right. I think that's the one where it probably makes sense to
Okay.
name senior center, but I agree about the rest, right? Like, do we say facility? Do we say senior community center? What do we do?
Sorry, just talking
Yeah,
it
no,
all
it's
out.
good. Oh, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, just for
Please.
a second, for clarification. I just want to make sure everyone knows that I didn't write these questions. So something was said here early, and that's
Oh, that was me. Sorry.
well, it's just it's just not clear. I just want to make sure people didn't know this is not coming from my office. Okay, this is a joint effort from everyone. The first set of questions, as Ashley said, came from from Sienna, and there, it was. There were questions. Some of them were confusing, so we clarified some of that information in order to make it more understandable. So that's all we're doing here today, as Kelly said, is taking feedback from everybody, because certainly everybody's opinion is important here. Because if it's confusing for you, it's going to be confusing for the public. So, and it's very hard. I'm not a survey question writer, because we see how difficult this is to get the answers we're looking for. I'm just saying that if we're going to call it, whatever we're going to call it, it just needs to be consistent. That it's referred to the same way in the question, so you don't confuse people even more. So I just want to put that out there. That's okay. You can ask me
Thank
any
you.
question you want.
Councilman Broderick, thank you.
I do think it makes sense, though, if we move 14 to first, then maybe something like new facility, because I get what you're saying. If I've selected I want a community center and then the rest of the 12 questions are about the senior center, I'm baffled. So I do think that could make sense to use more generic language if we shift those questions up front. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I at first thought like something like new facility would be too generically confusing, but I guess if we shift that question, that could really work. Also appreciate your teacher editing skills.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think number 8, I just wrote down unbalanced answers here. So
Mike, can you just read
Yeah.
or reference the question, because I've moved questions
sorry.
around, so your 8 and
question
my
8
8
is the
aren't
town
the same.
officials say that the current senior center is nearing the end of its useful life. So in there, when I mean unbalanced answers, so we're putting a price tag at $20 million on the renovation, but then right below that, we don't put a cost to a new senior center. I think we should, like, if we attach a cost, we should continue it throughout that question. And then that brings you back to, well, 3 different locations could be 3 different costs. But I just think it's unbalanced when you say 20 million, then right below that you say for something new and we don't give a cost associated to it. If that makes sense.
Hold on.
And did George ever give us a breakdown on that 20 million? We've heard that number. Like, did we ever receive a presentation on the breakdown of that 20 million?
Wasn't that in
He
the
did
5-year
pro-
capital
He did
plan?
provide a breakdown.
Okay.
But just to follow up on what you're saying, Mike, I mean, the only senior center cost that we have is the one that we costed out on the Grace Church property. So we really can't put a cost anywhere else because we don't have a cost on a community center or a senior center at this point, unless it's different from what we did at Grace Church. So it's hard to put numbers here. We don't want to skew this with numbers that don't exist. Where'd you get that? The question, well, where'd you get that number, right? So that's what's difficult about this, and I understand that that's part of the issue here.
Kelly, can I weigh on or just give background on the Tashua
Please.
thing before
Yes,
I forget?
Let's go.
So, Mike, you're right. The Tashua, and I know Lori, the chair of the building committee, is here. So I will only speak to the information I know. But I know Tashawa was tossed out by the committee some time ago. When we were specifying that question would be town-owned properties only, right? Because those are the only things we can control. Tashawa was the other place that we could add on. There are conversations happening at the Golf Commission about building a new clubhouse or a desire to build a new clubhouse. Certainly it has not made its way out of that commission, so I don't want to pretend like there's anything moving forward. I want to be clear, there is nothing moving forward at this point, but there are conversations. And it felt like to not at least bring that forward to this group as a conversation about whether we should put it on could be a missed opportunity. Now, I will caveat that with, we ran that by George. We ran this question by George, and his answer was, I don't know what the right characterization was. He expressed significant concerns about that location, but didn't say it's impossible. There are some obvious issues at Tashawa that led to the committee ranking that very low. I don't know what year that was, but a handful of years ago. Jason, you know?
Just having looked at that when I chaired the pool committee, there are some limiting factors on that site, not insurmountable, but it would have just made building a facility there more expensive. It's not on the sewer system. There's significant fill that would have to be brought in if you were going to build on a certain area. Parking was an issue. You'd have to relocate some stuff. It can be built, certainly it is a viable site, but given the factors at the time, it just was, the access in and out were not ideal for that constant flow of traffic. It just didn't make the rankings for the pool committee. The sewer was a big issue, particularly given the volume of water, obviously, in a pool. But I think the building committee, Lori, had similar issues with that site.
And more.
Yeah. So.
Right. So Jason is still right. So given all of that, thank you, Jason. That's a helpful refresh, right? And I don't think, again, we're not getting into a debate about the validity of any of these sites over the other. But with the fact that the Golf Commission is having conversations about a clubhouse, do we want to put Tashawa on this list so that if they are to move forward, if people express interest, we can do real thorough investigation of that site location? Or is it that we're throwing a, grenade into this with something that is not necessarily the best site to begin with? So I'm very cognizant of all the building committee work that went into this, the reasons why that is a site that is thrown out. Lori, I hear you. I'm not disrespecting all of that work, but we only have so much money and so much appetite to build things in this town. And so is it a missed opportunity if we don't consider it?
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say I think it's smart to keep Tashawa on there, because say the survey comes back overwhelmingly that people want a pool and a community center. Grace Church does not have the acreage to accommodate that. Hardy Lane, I'm not even sure really has the ability to do that either. So having a larger facility like Tashawa might be something that you might have to go towards. Just my 2 cents. I don't think it's bad to know what people feel about it.
Sorry, my microphone's off. Go ahead.
Just to circle back on when we were talking about question 8 a little bit ago about that question having answer B talking about the potential estimation of $20 million to fix the senior center. I wonder if letter C's option answer should be build a senior center, et cetera, at potentially larger cost, right? We can't put in a dollar amount, but maybe that's a way to gauge how people feel. Do they think it's worth the $20 million to fix a current dilapidated building, or are they willing to pay more for something else elsewhere?
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
So, is it inappropriate? It might be. Is it inappropriate to ask, like, just, what are you comfortable with? What's the threshold for a referendum? 15 million? To hold a referendum is 15?
Actually,
17?
Maria did oh,
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, because inflation, imagine
Right.
when that number was set.
I did the other day ask Maria to do the calculations for the cost of living inflation. I think it's about $18 million now.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
that will come back to they'll go to Board of Finance and then come back to the Town Council for approval.
okay, so if we did just, it's a survey, so we have that flexibility. If we asked a question like, would you be comfortable with paying, like, with a facility for 18 million, and then perhaps like what that would look like tax base, and then would you be comfortable with, what number would you most be comfortable with? Like this.
So
number,
like an
this number?
open-ended question?
No,
about-
like I think you could give a multiple choice, like 18 million plus, 25 million plus, like, and then give like a basic. I feel like there's a threshold. Like there's people who would like be really like are okay with like maybe 18 million, but might be like cause. And I don't know why that is. Like everybody's different, and what the could be the whatever that happens to be. Maybe asking. I don't know if that's appropriate or not to ask. But I was, maybe that's a question.
If I could, the number is $18,780,000, 296.
All right, so we'll round down to 18 million. Like, what would you be comfortable with? 18 million.
In another month, it'll be higher, right?
Right. So you round down to 18 million and see where you are. That might be. I feel like when you are calling people, as somebody, I feel like I've only answered like one survey, and I was rather annoyed by the end of it because it took longer than I had anticipated. But we want to try and be brief in terms of like wording of questions. So if we could just get like a pinpoint of like, or not a pinpoint, but like an idea of more people are okay with spending 25 million, more people, or however many people are okay with spending 30 plus million as opposed to 18 million. Obviously everybody, if you're okay with spending 30 plus million, you'd be okay with spending 18 million, like that sort of question. If I don't know if that's possible, that how to write that question, to the first selectman's point that writing sample survey questions is not my forte. And then my other question is, how are we, I know I asked this question and she answered it and I can't remember fully, but like the numbers are going to be pulled from the voting rules. How are we getting the numbers?
Who we call, who
Yeah,
we
how
actually
to-
call. I thought they were buying a list, but I don't. That's a good
I know
question.
she probably
Yes,
answered this
they
and I
get-
can't remember.
They will get a list of everyone in Trumbull.
Mm-hmm.
They buy those lists just like any national research company firm does. Right? It doesn't have to be registered voters. It needs to be residents of the town.
Right.
And they will look at the data and the makeup of Trumbull by age and party and what am I missing? Gender. And they will call through numbers and then weight it to make sure that it aligns, right? So if they get too many women, right, they'll use weighting techniques to make sure that they weight that data appropriately, but they will purchase a list of phone numbers.
And then hang on.
And there's there's the whole PowerPoint that they did that we all have.
Yeah, she definitely gave answers, and
And an FAQ document that they have for us to explain some of these questions or answers to these questions.
And it's not, they'd have to hand dial, right? They don't, because they can't, can they auto dial? Or I feel like that goes to like, I feel like auto dialing is not allowed, right? Doesn't it get blocked?
Yeah, they have people who will be making the calls. I don't know whether they will be able to auto dial. If you auto dial, you cannot leave custom voicemails. So they use a combination of text outreach and phone outreach in order to get to people.
Got it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this a one shot with this survey, or do we have a chance to do 2 surveys? No, the point is, like, we need Sienna's help here. Like, these questions are all over the place. I look at this and I get more confused with what I want, right? But if we did an initial survey that said, we don't want it at Grace Church, we don't want it at Hardy Lane, but we all agree we want it at Tashua, and heck, we're going to have a pool. Well, maybe that would swing 400, 500, 600 votes. Maybe right off the bat, well, no, Tashua's a home run, it includes a pool, right? Now we're getting real feedback from the people that we're engaging with. Compared to a lot of this stuff, I mean, we sit on the committee, and I get confused by this at times. I think if you're an average citizen, this could be overwhelming to read. But if we really nail down the 5 or 6 things that we're most focused on, then I think we can hit a second survey, and that would give us real concrete data how we want to move forward, instead of overwhelming them with too much data.
I'm just wondering, per that point, because one of the good things is they are going to compile that data for us ultimately, right? So like, I agree, we need to make sure each of these questions is individually clear. And I get the coherence, like, does it flow together? But then ultimately, I would say, right, they're going to present us with that information. Like, I was looking back, Councilor Walsh, you had that question of, like, and I think Councilor Sather, could we do some kind of, like, scale of, like, price? We would get a pretty good sense from some of these questions. There's one, I've lost it for a moment, but, like, I just don't want to pay for a multi-million-dollar building. That's one of the options, and you can strongly agree with that. That would be pretty good data. Like, if we got that back and that was 80% of the respondents, okay, we have to go forward. I wonder if that catches it. And then one other thought, because I had written down, I think Councilor Sather, it was 12A, and that was the one that I agree with you. It was a little clunky about assessed value. So then I wonder if we have a scale that's like $18 million, which would be an assessed value, would that get even if we had that? I don't know. As a respondent, would that be more confusing, or?
I think having two more sessions like this with Sienna here, to Tom's point, could really simplify things for the reader, right? If we really, to your point, really drill down on the questions, and maybe after 2 or 3 sessions of this, we would feel real comfortable with their input, though. I think being able to work through these questions with them.
I was referring to the compiled data post-survey, just to be clear. I think, right, we get that data. They can put that together because that's their specialty. I know I'm not a math teacher, but, like, they can definitely do that kind of statistical work. I think I look at this and I go, overall, I think we'll get, like you said, we're going to get a pretty good sense of if 90% of people come back and they say Tashua, okay, if we keep that in the survey, that's pretty good information. If it's split, we as a council are going to have to interpret that. But I'm pretty comfortable knowing Sienna does this for a living, right, that we would from this get a sense of price, location, and why you voted against it. So I kind of go back to, not to be a nerd, Ann, but like backwards design. What do we want to know? We want to know why you voted against it. What are you looking for in something in location? I think we would get that from this.
Through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I think 2 things, right? One is that, it's not necessarily designed to read like a storybook, right? It's designed to get a bunch of different information about a single project, right? Or potential project. I love the idea of bringing the one question forward and then calling it a facility for the rest of the questions to take some of that ambiguity out and really let people kind of envision what they want out of this and answer the questions accordingly. Right, but this is designed to be able to take all of these questions and all of these answers and have lots of pieces of feedback that when you overlay them, you get to hopefully some concrete answers or strong opinions. My suggestion from a process standpoint, Councilman Malazzi, is that we take this feedback, right? I've taken tons of notes. I'm not suggesting that we have to be done right now, but just from a process standpoint, we take this back to Sienna. I can send them a note, tomorrow with all of this feedback, that they come up with a new draft based off of some of this with a real emphasis on ensuring there's no bias in questions, simplifying language, having it read more like English and not, survey speak, and that we hold a special meeting of the Public Works Committee in the next few weeks, cognizant of spring break for many people, in order to bring Sienna in, go through that draft, finalize that draft, and get it out into the field in the next few weeks so that we can have some answers, have that presentation at a town council meeting, and then do the hard work of the council, which will be figuring out what's next and how we want to process that. But that would be my recommendation, is that we take this, get a draft, get Sienna in for a special meeting of this committee, do another working session, and then finalize it.
If we compiled a list of our information, could we send that across to you, and could you get that to Sienna?
Sure.
Just so, I mean, we're not doing this again, like God forbid half the information. I mean, I could probably talk for another hour on it, but I don't want to do that to you. But I could simplify things and put some things in a bullet point that maybe you could review and pass along. This way, when we bring them in next time, we're more ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I think if you can send an email in the next day or two, that would be great, and we can get that over to them. And, you know, again, figure out, I'm mindful of spring break, so we will have to look at calendars for everybody.
Good deal.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question. I had some people had asked me if there was ever going to be a public comment allowed about the survey questions. Or, you know, at the discretion of you guys, at the chair, or at a town council meeting, or
Yeah,
at
I
any
don't
point?
think so. I mean, I think that's what we're here for, right? Is to represent the folks, but
We don't typically hold public comment at the committee level, and because we've always said this is going to run through this committee, you know, certainly I would say people are always welcome to send emails to any of us. They can send them to council clerk email, and they'll be distributed to the full town council, but we don't typically have public comment at committee level.
anything else?
Hang on.
Yeah,
no,
go ahead.
Sorry. So can we just Ashley? Can it be included that somewhere in there, like, are you registered to vote? Yes, no. Did you vote in the last election? And like, because I don't know if did it ever directly ask, like, did you vote on this?
Yeah, I think it's number 3. Number 3 was, there was a referendum. Were you in favor?
Okay.
But maybe
I
we
also-
should add did not vote in the November election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Add that in
That's
at the right, because well, there'd be people who'd be like, yeah, I voted, and then they didn't.
Right. And I think what Councilman Walsh said about district is really important,
Yeah.
too. That was a really good point.
Yeah. That,
Yeah, again, just to the extent that people are voters versus residents and may not know. So I think that's a question for Sienna of how do we capture that? And maybe it's just an open-ended question, and if they don't know, they can say don't know or refused. But we're able to ask the district or the polling location.
And then can I have last question? What's the purpose of the question that said, have you used or visited the senior center in Trumbull in the past 12 months? What's the purpose of that question? The very last page. I feel like it's like,
I mean, my takeaway is they're trying to gauge a general awareness about the current state of the senior center. And if people haven't visited or haven't utilized it, that says something about perhaps their perception of the issue. And if they have, they may lean one way or another. I didn't think that question was, you know, I thought that was a useful question to know what percentage of the responding or respondents are aware personally about the current center. Because
It's one of the demographic questions, right? So it's really not an opinion piece. It's just cross-tabbing, like, do you have kids? Are you registered to vote? You know, household income. I think it's just a way to cross-tab additional data point. Yes or no?
What else? You got more? Are you sure? Well, yes.
I just would like to say thank you to all the committee members. I think it's refreshing when we actually can, you know, work collaboratively, and I think this is a good meeting, and I'm appreciative of everyone's time and efforts here.
Thank you, Councilman Marsh. And on that very positive bipartisan note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? All right. Thanks, everyone.